This lecture will provide context to the first author we study this semester, Henry David Thoreau. American Romanticism. What is it? Who was writing during this time? You probably recognize Edgar Allan Poe on the right. His writing style and purposes for writing were so different from Thoreau, and yet there are many commonalities. Romanticism is just one of many literary eras in the United States, and these are decided by scholars long after writers have published their works. They're connected to events going on both in the United States and globally as they affect what people are interested in the styles in which they write. They're given these dates, and they are, in some ways, quite arbitrary. Washington Irving first published the Sketchbook, his first major collection of short stories, in 1819, and Walt Whitman published his first edition of Leaves of Grass in 1855. And so those are the dates, and some people round them up over here, that we attach to Romanticism. So what defines this movement? First off, know that it crossed many different art forms: writing, music, sculpture, painting. It was a reaction to the Age of Reason. Think Thomas Jefferson, Benjamin Franklin, and instead focused on these 5 things: imagination, nature, the inner self, emotion, and freedom. I have an X over here on Cupid. Romanticism is not connected to like Valentine's Day sort of love, but emotion as an authentic way to process and understand the world. Very distinctly different from the Age of Reason. Romanticism began across the pond in England and other parts of Europe. Some of these famous poets you may recognize here. And here are several events both in the United States and in France and England that influenced what writers wanted to write about. Many things swing on a pendulum: politics, writing, philosophy. And so Romanticism was a reaction to the era before, the Age of Reason and scientific rationale, logic. These writers wanted to bring back imagination and how to understand the world through emotion and imagination. This poem from Wordsworth, a British writer, really captures the romantic essence in just the first few lines. The world is too much with us. Late and soon, getting and spending, we lay waste our powers. Little we see in nature that is ours. We have given our hearts away, a sordid boon. How appropriate for today's world, getting and spending, getting and spending. The Romantics would argue that people spend too much time in accumulating goods and not focusing on the value of nature. So as a reminder, these are the 5 elements that we're going to focus on of Romanticism: imagination, inner self, nature, and the sublime. So the sublime suggests that something is so magnificent and powerful that as humans we lose a sense of ourselves and are both in amazement and awe. And that can be including terror, not just beautiful, but in awe also suggests terror. Emotion as authentic source, and freedom. Under this umbrella of American Romanticism, there are 2 distinct schools: the Transcendentalist and the Gothics. You may recognize Washington Irving, Hawthorne, Poe, and Melville. And all of those writers focused, well, the main thing they had in common was they focused on the inherent evil in humankind. Where the Transcendentalist, Emerson, Thoreau, Fuller, and Whitman, they focused on the inherent goodness in humankind. So what is Gothicism? Very quickly, its term comes from Gothic architecture with the flying buttresses of, for instance, Notre Dame Cathedral. we have remote castles, crumbling things, horror and terror, things that are mysterious and inexplicable. So not necessarily gore, just straight blood, but things that are psychologically scary. Very opposite of that, we have Transcendentalism, which was both a philosophical and social movement, and it started in New England. It was influenced by a variety of philosophies, and this one, and including the Far East. But Transcendentalism, that's a mouthful, taught that divinity, that means, the divine, God, the universe, however you want to define that, pervades all nature and humanity. It's a very important tenet. They held very progressive views. They were reformers in society. And the leaders were Emerson and Thoreau. And Walt Whitman was sort of a late disciple of this movement. So I've argued that this movement crosses many different artistic bounds. So let's examine this painting for a minute. Even though it's the Italian coast, it's by American painter Thomas Cole. What would you say the mood of this painting is? Peaceful, serene. My eye is first captured by this crumbling lookout tower. Notice that nature has taken over. What is the presence of humankind here? Very small in relationship to the grand sea, a shepherd and his flock. Looks like there might be a goat up here. A little tiny sail. Nature is very immense compared to the human. Here's another. Frederick Church. Niagara Falls from the American side. What would you say the tone of this painting is? Magnificent, awe-inspiring. A different type of water scene than our last one. This definitely would evoke the sublime. Notice I think there's a little rainbow here in the right corner. Where is mankind in this image? I don't think he is in here at all. One last one. Albert Bierstadt. What type of feeling do you get from this painting? For me, I speak just for myself, the water looks icy cold with that cool green shade that Bierstadt uses. It looks rather terrifying, but look at these seals. They're in their natural habitat. This one down the bottom looks like he might have a fish, a salmon. There's a seagull. So the seals are quite comfortable and quite happy playing. Again, this, I think, inspires awe with a little bit of fear for humans, that is. It's beautiful. But, we're not involved in this painting at all. So let's go back to the literature. Those paintings do help put you in the mood, I think, for what we're going to read this week. In case your geology is a little dusty, we'll be in New England, in Massachusetts, as a matter of fact. And here's a closer view. Here's Concord, where both Ralph Waldo Emerson and Henry David Thoreau, both have three names that must be said, lived and wrote in Concord. And then in a few weeks, we're going to travel about 2 hours west. That's 2 hours by car to Amherst. So just a wee bit on Emerson. I'll tell you more background about him next week. He is, remember this, America's first philosopher. At this point in time, of course, the Revolutionary War has been fought and won, but America was trying to establish itself as credible thinkers and writers. And Emerson was the first, really, to achieve that fame. He went on the lecture circuit tour. People would drive for miles around to hear him speak. He was a former minister. He was a minister in the Unitarian Church, which some of their doctrine are very loosely worded. It is not a strict kind of doctrine. It accepts many different types of faiths into its body. And yet, I think this is interesting, Emerson found the Unitarian Church to be too restrictive. And so he wrote many essays on different topics, and we are going to read two, one on self-reliance and one entitled Nature. We will read only excerpts of those. Why are we going to bother with Emerson? He was the mentor of Henry David Thoreau. And so many of the ideas that Emerson had, Thoreau took and expanded upon. And this is his home here in Concord.